So welcome back. We are here for the second part of our lecture, and we have seen the utility maximization problem. Now I would like to see the problem of expenditure minimization, which is symmetric, let's say symmetric with respect to the utility maximization. So we'll see also the expenditure minimization and try to see this symmetry between the two problems. They are both problems that are defined to solve the situation of a consumer that wants to select its best consumption bundle. So let me share again my screen with you. Okay, and the hypotheses are similar to those that we had seen at the beginning. So let's suppose that we have a preference relation that is rational, continuous, locally non-associated. So exactly the situation we described before, defined on a consumption set X, which is a subset of RL plus. U of X is our utility function, and it is continuous, and it represents our preference relation. Given this, these initial conditions, let me see if I can, okay. These initial condition we defined, no, sorry, it didn't come out correctly. However, given these conditions, we defined the utility maximization problem. And we said that the utility maximization problem is actually a problem where we want to find the maximum utility level. So we want to find the consumption bundle that gives the maximum utility to our consumer. Parallel to this, subject to the usual constraints that the price vector is definitely greater than 0, and that this time we don't have a condition on the wealth level, but we have a condition on the utility, because this time we take the utility for given. We impose that the utility is greater than the utility of the null consumption bundle. So we are actually saying that we want a utility level that is greater than the utility that the consumer would have if he was consuming nothing. What we are doing is we are ruling out a non-interesting situation. So when the consumption bundle is equal to all 0, which obviously is not an interesting solution. We want to find a consumption bundle which is not this trivial one. So given these conditions, we can now define an expenditure minimization problem. So when we said before that the problem for the consumer was to find its best consumption bundle. So the consumption bundle that was maximizing his utility, given that expenditure was within a given limit. So expenditure was less than the maximum wealth of the consumer. Parallel to this, the expenditure minimization problem is a different way of seeing the consumer's problem, because in the utility maximization problem, we were computing the maximum level of utility that could be attained by the consumer who had the given wealth level. Now, with the expenditure minimization problem, which we call briefly EMP, we are computing the minimum level of wealth that is required to reach a given utility level. So this is as I said, the dual problem to the utility maximization problem. So it is actually, let's say it is searching or capturing the same aim of the utility maximization problem, the same aim of using efficiently the resources, the consumer resourcing, but it reverses, this expenditure minimization problem reverses the roles of the objective function and constraints, because in the utility maximization problem, the objective function was the utility function and the constraints was the level of wealth for the consumer, so the expenditure price times X. And now we reverse the two. In the EMP, in the expenditure minimization problem, in the expenditure minimization problem, the objective function is total expenditure, is no more the utility function. So we want to minimize expenditure subject to the fact that we want to reach a given level of utility. So we have reversed, as you see, the roles of objective function and of constraints. What can we say about this expenditure minimization problem? So we can write it as a minimum of our total expenditure, which is P times X. So we have to find a vector X, a consumption bundle X positive, obviously. So we don't want the trivial case. That minimizes total expenditure subject to the fact that the utility is greater or equal than a given level of utility. So minimum, what we are looking for is the minimum level of expenditure that is of wealth needed by the consumer, required to attain a certain level of utility. So as you see here, we reverse the situation of the utility maximization problem. Graphically, with respect to the utility maximization problem, this is quite similar, but in this case, what we have is, if we take the simple case of a bidimensional situation where we have a consumption bundle X1, X2, two bundles. We may write the the budget line for the consumer, and the budget line for any consumption bundle, and we may take one consumption bundle X star, and then we may take all consumption bundles whose utility is greater than this. And as we know that the indifference curves have this shape, this area is the area that is defined as the set of all X, in this case in R square, such that U of X is greater or equal than U of X star. And this U of X star is our level. So graphically, our X star, the solution, is the point that lies on the lower budget set. So we take this set of all X associated with a utility that is at least U over bar. And then we have to take the lowest budget line. This is the line of all X in R square, such that P times X is equal to P times X star. So we take all different bundles that have the same, that are connected, that are linked to the same level of expenditure of our X star. And this is our optimum. We could, this is our budget line, so it could be upper or lower. We take all the consumption set X that are associated with at least the level of utility U bar, and we take the one which is on the lowest possible budget line. Okay. When we have this, we have the solution to the expenditure minimization problem. We may now that we may define more in more detail the connection between the utility maximization problem and the expenditure minimization problem. In particular, we can prove, and we take this for assumed, we don't prove it, but it is proved that if we have an X star which is optimal under the UMP, so if X star is our optimum under the UMP when wealth is W greater than 0, then this X star is also optimum in the expenditure minimization problem when the required level of utility is exactly U of X star, so the utility that we had here. And if X is the solution to the expenditure minimization problem when the utility level is U star, the minimized expenditure level Px star is exactly equal to W. So this is the relation between the two. Conversely, we can say that if X star is optimal in the expenditure minimization problem, when the required utility level is a given U, which we want greater than U con 0, then this X star is also optimum under the utility maximization problem when wealth level is P times X star. And in this case, the maximized utility level U is exactly the level U that we wanted, is equal to this U, the required utility level in the expenditure minimization problem. So this proposition, with its two definitions, gives us the exact link connections between the utility maximization problem and the expenditure minimization problem. And finally, as we have defined the indirect utility function for the expenditure, for the utility maximization problem, you remember that the indirect utility function is the function VPW given by the values of the utility function for the optimum X star. We call it VP, so the utility value of the utility maximization problem for any PW. Then similarly, we can define the expenditure function. The expenditure function for any, this time, price or utility situation is the set of minimum expenditure levels in the expenditure minimization problem for each price utility level. So it is the value of the expenditure minimization problem. It's the expenditure function is the value of the expenditure for any optimum solution of the expenditure minimization problem. So this is the dual of the indirect utility function. And finally, as we have defined the Eurasian demand correspondence, remember in the utility maximization problem, it's our XPW. In the expenditure minimization problem, we define the Hicksian or compensated demand function, which we write as HPU. And this is the function that assigns the set of optimum consumption vectors in the expenditure minimization problem for each price utility situation. So for each PW, the Hicksian demand function assigns the set of optimum consumption vector. So it's the, let's say, the function that gives us the solutions to the expenditure minimization problem, as the Eurasian demand correspondence gave us the solution to the utility maximization problem. So remember that the dual of the Eurasian demand correspondence is the Hicksian demand correspondence. This is for the expenditure minimization problem, and this is for the utility maximization problem. So we have two parallel problems, and I think that they will be more clear in their interconnections when we see them applied in cost-benefit analysis, because in cost-benefit analysis, what we will do is actually, in some cases, we will want to maximize individuals' utility. In some other cases, minimize total costs, total expenditures, for instance. So these are concepts that are very useful in cost-benefit analysis. And having said this, is there any question on this point, at this point of the lecture? No question? If there are no questions on this, sure? If there are no questions on this, then I would like to move to a different issue in our lecture, and that's analyzing in more detail the process for cost-benefit analysis. Let me take a specific slide. I think it's this one. Yes. Okay. I would like to say something on the theoretical foundations of cost-benefit analysis, and I will try to be fast enough to leave time to your colleagues for their presentations. So we are moving to a partially different perspective. We are now moving to analysis of cost-benefit procedures. We can summarize very briefly the theoretical foundation for cost-benefit analysis. The basic notions from which any cost-benefit analysis would start are human preferences. The human preferences are taken as the source of value. In cost-benefit analysis, the main point is to attach values to different alternatives, and these values are taken from the preferences of individuals that are involved in the projects or policies that you are actually analyzing. So these preferences are linked strictly to the concept of utility, because it's from the concept of utility that we can attach values to preferences, utility of well-being, depending on whether you are using a more economic language or not. But so utility is a very important element of cost-benefit analysis. These preferences are linked to individuals' utilities through very rigorous rules and actions. So you have already seen this in the discussion we had last week with the presentations of your colleagues. Cost-benefit analysis are based on very well specified and rigorous rules. And the objective of this is that you may, if you have rigorous rules to determine the utility of individuals in different states, in different situations, then you can compare different situations, and you are always able to say which of the alternatives is best for the individual, for the society, for whatever stakeholder you are considering. When utility is higher in one state, then that's the preferred state. The point is how you get this level of utility and preferences in a market situation. In a market situation, the utility that one individual may derive from one alternative can be conveyed by prices and by decisions to spend or not to spend money. So this is the clue to measure preferences and utility. The decision to spend money gives us a value for the utility, which otherwise we wouldn't be able to measure. So preferences are measured by two concepts, which we will define shortly, and which are basic to cost-benefit analysis. These two concepts are willingness to pay for a benefit, and willingness to accept compensation for costs. These are the monetary values that allows us to measure preferences. The higher the willingness to pay for a certain condition, the higher the preference of an individual for that given condition. The higher the willingness to accept compensation, so as much as the willingness to accept compensation is high, the higher the damage that an individual would derive from a given situation. So imagine I tell you I'm reducing pollution by 1%. How much would you be willing to pay for this? This gives you a money value for such a situation. So it is a clue to your preferences for that. So willingness to pay is the primary mean for measuring preferences, and money is the measuring rod to aggregate preferences, because once we have a common tool, rod to measure preferences, that's money, then we can add up preferences of different individuals or preferences of the same individuals for different situations. When we have a common measuring rod, then we can aggregate and speak, for instance, of social cost or social benefits. If we don't have this basic common tool, then we cannot aggregate. We cannot add up different things measured through different measuring units. And for potential losses, as I said, the concept is used is that of willingness to accept compensations. Again, also for social preferences that, as I said, are the result of the aggregation of individual preferences, this aggregation takes place through rigorous rules. And we have the social benefit as the sum of individuals' benefit, and social cost as the sum of individuals' costs. Having said this about cost, social cost and social benefits, I want to introduce the so-called Kaldor-Hicks compensation test. This is a rule that allows the evaluation of a policy of project, and we can say that this test is met, is satisfied when you propose a change, so a new policy, a new program, and some changes in the status quo, and you will have some beneficiaries from that change. You may also have some losers, someone who is negatively affected by the change you are proposing. So how would you choose whether a change is worth implementing or not once you have both losers and gainers from that project? The Kaldor-Hicks compensation test gives you an approach to solve this situation. And it tells you that if beneficiaries from a change can hypothetically compensate the losers from the change and still have some net gains left over. So this means that their benefits are higher than the losses. Then the Kaldor-Hicks compensation test is met and the policy or project is worth implementing. So the Kaldor-Hicks compensation test actually is a kind of test that helps you check whether benefits are actually exceeding costs. And if it is met, the project is worth implementing. Then one other issue in cost-benefit analysis is that often costs and benefits do not accrue at the same point in time. They may come out at different moments in time, some earlier, some later. And if you want to compare costs and benefits, you need to compare values that are accruing at different times. And this is not straightforward. The general rule is that future costs and benefits should be weighted. Weighted because costs and benefits that are accruing in times that are farther away have obviously a lower value. The point is that if it's the common point on discounting, some value that is accruing in a later point in time is equivalent to a lower value today, because if I was having that lower value today, I would be able to invest it, for instance, and gain more tomorrow. So higher values tomorrow correspond to lower values today. So I have to discount future costs and benefits. I have to weight them. And I do this with what is called a discount factor. The discount factor depends on the time t when I'm calculating it, and it is given by 1 over 1 plus s, where s is an interest rate, and we will discuss how this interest rate has to be defined. I know you have been already talking about this with Professor Mazzanti. And then we have t, time. So time may be 1, 2, 3, etc. How much farther in time we are going. So this is a temporal weight that we attach to costs and benefits that are accruing later on. This S, as I said, is the discount rate. And normally in cost-benefit analysis, we take a so-called social discount rate. And again, on discounting, the idea, as I said, is that individuals prefer now to later. So future benefits and costs are discounted. And the rate is the main point. And as I said, we will discuss of this later. So once we have said that we have costs and benefits, that we have a discount factor to make costs and benefits accruing at different point in time comparable, we need a decision rule, a rule that tells us whether a project or policy is worth implementing. And the decision rule for setting a policy or project is written here. These rules tells us that if the sum of all benefits accruing to all the I individuals in our society, so we take all the individuals which we label by I, and we take all their benefits accruing at all times, now, next time 1, time 2, time 3, time 4, so going farther away in time, and we discount this using our discount factor that depends on how far in time we are. So we sum all benefits and we subtract the sum of all individual costs, again discounting future values. And if this difference is positive, so if the sum of all discounted benefits is greater than the sum of all discounted costs, then the project is worth implementing. This doesn't mean that we have to implement it, because we might have more than one alternative project that satisfy this decision rule, and then we will see what kind of approach we can take to choose among different projects. But surely the basic decision rule is that this condition, this inequality, has to be met. And as we have already said, benefits and costs. Benefits represents gains that an individual may get from a policy, and they can be measured by the maximum amount of goods or services that they are willing to give up. So we may use the willingness to pay concept to measure benefits, and costs represent reductions in well-being, so they can be measured by the amount of money that the individual would be willing to give up in order to prevent the change. Or conversely, the amount of money that the individual would require in compensation to accept the change. So as it's not written here, willingness to accept. Oh, yes, it was here, sorry, in the further line. So we measure benefits using the concept of willingness to pay, and either willingness to pay or willingness to accept to measure costs. Now, well, I will switch on this because I think we can do this next week, because it's not needed for the presentation of your colleagues. So I would stop here, and we will look more in detail at willingness, the concepts of willingness to pay and willingness to accept next week, so that I can leave time enough to your colleagues for the presentation today. So we will start next week from this point. And if you want a couple of minutes break to prepare for your presentation, I'm speaking to group 4, who is now.
No, it's okay. We can start. Don't
Okay,
worry.
so okay, very good, very good. So I will stop sharing my screen, so you
Thank you.
may start your presentation. And just to introduce your presentation to your colleagues, it's about the critiques on cost-benefit analysis. So I leave to you the screen.
Okay, thank you, Professor. I just share my screen. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, it's coming up. Just okay. Yes.
Can you hear me also, right?
Yes, perfectly.
Here you go. Okay. So, thank you so much, first of all, for the opportunity to make this presentation. Today we are going to speak about the CBA and its critics. First of all, we will have a small introduction about the CBA, just to complete what you just said, just to have like a bigger panoramic about the CBA. So the first question that we find in during the presentation, the presentation, during making the presentation was is the cost benefits analysis the best method in order to evaluate a project? This question for us was really important, and we found that it's not the best one, but for sure it's one of the most complete. So let's start to speak about the CBA. The CBA theory has been developed most over the past 50 years, and is basically based on the notion of human preferences. We can define the CBA as a systematic approach to estimate the cost and the benefits of alternatives. And the CBA also provides rules for aggregating preferences, so it's possible to speak of a social preferences for or against something. So how is possible like to measure those preferences? We have from one side the willingness to pay for the benefits, and from the other side we have the willingness to accept the for the cost. So the results should be like a net present value that is higher than zero, so where the benefits are like higher than the cost, and so we have the willingness to pay that are higher than the willingness to accept. Let's go now a little bit deeper, the willingness to pay and the willingness to accept. The willingness to pay we can define as the maximum amount of good or services or money income that an individual could be willing to renew in order to obtain the change. Let's make an example just to understand better what we are speaking about. If we have this utility function with a u0 given by y0, that is the level of income, and e0, that is the level of the environmental quality, we suppose now that we have an increase in the environmental quality. So we pass from A0 to A1. So we have like a change from the a shift from the utility function u0 to the utility function u1. This change, this different, cannot like direct be measured. So it's important like to measure, to put like some indirect tools. For example, the willingness to pay. We arrive in this situation where we have like two combinations, as we can see here. We have in the right part, we have the utility function that we had in the beginning, and in the left part we have the new utility function where the increasing in the environmental quality given by A1 is compensated from the reduction of the level of income by the willingness to pay. From the other way around, we have the willingness to accept. If the change reduce the well-being, the willingness to accept would be measured by the amount of money that the individual would require in compensation in order to accept the change. Here, let's make also another example. Here we have the same utility function u0, but here we have and decreasing in the environmental quality. So we have also here the shift from like the utility function 0 to the utility function 1, where the environmental quality is less. And so we arrive to the situation where the individual can like choose from the first utility function here and the second utility function, where the decreasing in the environmental quality is compensated by the willingness to accept in the revenue part, in the income part. In conclusion, we can say that the willingness to accept usually is higher than the willingness to pay, because the willingness to pay has a limit that is given by the income of the individual, and the willingness to accept hypothetically doesn't like doesn't have like this limit, and it's like infinity. And the last thing that you will see also in during the presentation is that the willingness to accept is higher, because the individual also value more a loss than a gain. So I would like now to leave the word to Giovanni for the second part. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi everyone. Basically, what we thought was that there is no perfect rule to make a decision on whether a policy or a project is good or bad, but the CBA has its rule, and it's based on the Kaldor-Hicks rule. The Kaldor-Hicks rule states that if gainers can compensate losers and have net gains left, then that policy is acceptable. This is actually comes from the idea of Pareto efficiency. However, Pareto efficiency is when a project improves the welfare of at least one person without any welfare loss of any other. So it's a win-win situation. However, these situations are actually very rare in real life. There's almost always somebody who loses from a new policy. So to make it more real, more applicable, the cost-benefit analysis has changed, has adopted a less strict version of Pareto efficiency. This is why the Kaldor-Hicks rule is also called a potential Pareto improving principle. There are two provisions that make it applicable. Compensations between from the winners to the losers doesn't actually need to be paid. It's a theoretical, hypothetical compensation. And since we have assumed that interpersonal comparisons of welfare are impossible, they can be in a certain way monetized, but on a non-monetized base, they are not possible. We assume as impossible. These are avoided because it's assumed that it's the loser who decides which amount it is needed to keep its welfare unchanged. There are after all this introduction, we are talking about some of the critiques to cost-benefit analysis. The first set of critiques are towards the neoclassical welfare economics foundation of cost-benefit analysis, in particular to the Kaldor-Hicks rule. And the second set is based on the role of individual preferences in social decision making. I'm going to talk about one of the critiques to the Kaldor-Hicks rule, which is the Szytowski paradox. Basically, as we have said, the Kaldor-Hicks rule is when states that a policy is welfare improving if the gainers can hypothetically compensate the losers and still have some gains left. However, this rule that seems quite ingenious actually has some inconsistencies. For example, there might be policies which actually shift the utility possibility curve. For example, in the picture we see the utility possibility curve shift from JK to GH. So if based on the cost-benefit analysis, we had to judge the movement from C to D, this would be approved because with theoretical compensation, moving from C to D, with theoretical compensation, staying on the same utility possibility curve GH, we could reach the theoretical compensation state F, which is clearly wealth improving when compared to C. However, this is also true of the opposite direction. So from D to C, since the utility possibility curve shifts, the theoretical compensation state E is also welfare improving on D. So both directions would be allowed, and this, of course, is an inconsistency. This has been defined by Chitowski in an article in 1941, A Note on Welfare Propositions in Economics. And basically, it's when the Caloric rule sanctions the movement from a state to another, but also the reverse movement. This is, of course, a critique of the idea of hypothetical compensation, and it's not does not always happen. The utility possibility curves may not shift. There might be some types of utility curves which are called Chitowski curves, where this paradox happens. But in order to avoid it, we need to impose that it is only the winners that can compensate the losers, so only the active direction of the project, but not the reverse. This way, it is only one of the two compensation states which are reachable, and therefore the project is acceptable. We can avoid the Chitowski paradox because only one movement is acceptable. I now leave the word to Massimiliano.
Okay, thank you, Giovanni. Now I will go on with this first line of criticism, and another criticism arising from the fact that policies may change the distribution of income, and therefore the relative price, is the boundary paradox. This paradox is described by the possibility that the policy showing the highest net benefit may not be the best one to undertake. And so Bergson showed that one of the states from this problem would be to assume a social welfare function. The social welfare function is a rule that declares how aggregate welfare could vary with the set of all individuals' welfare. But now emerges another kind of problem. The problem is finding a social welfare function that might be considered as partially consensus function that, let's say, is shared by all. And there are many possible functions, but there is not the practical rule of deciding which one to use. About that, Kenneth Harrow showed that it is impossible to construct that function without going through one or more of a series of axiomatic rules. This is the Harrow impossibility theorem, and this theorem has been the subject of much debate, in which the aim was to find escape accidents. For example, by relaxing one or more actions, or by including moral rules about the just distribution of welfare within the society. But just as there are many ways of aggregating individuals' welfare to get different social welfare functions, so there are many different concepts of what constitutes a just division of welfare in society. So the critics of the CBA rely on this underlying social welfare function in which it is possible to adapt the individual's welfare. And the dominant reason why the CBA is not credible. But, however, the problem is that the social decision-making process consists in evaluating gains and losses, and therefore to decide the relative importance of different individual gain and losses. In short, it is very hard to see how the problems that affect CDA can be avoided by alternative approach. And this concludes the first line of criticism. And now I give the floor to Adriano, who will speak about the second line of criticism.
Thank you, Massimiliano. Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk about the second line of criticism that is against the classic CBA's conception that human preferences should be taken into account in any social decision-making rule. And for this reason, some CBAs advocates that this conception is not the only relevant. So it's natural to wonder when individuals' preferences count and when they do not. For this reason, the use of CBA is considered so controversial in certain situations or for a specific decision, for example, when the decisions are about the environment. And in this sense, there is the right-based approach that is in contrast with the traditional CBA approach. And this consists in taking into account the rights of other natural species that are not evaluable using human preferences. And this concept, the right-based approach, is strictly linked to the endogenous preferences, a concept that has been defined by Gowdy in 2004 as the preferences that are formed by the social context of decision-making, by how others behave, by institutions and social conditions and conditioning. So we are going to it's natural to ask ourselves what are they actually and what are the most relevant endogenous preferences for environmental evaluation. And these are three, and we have the endowment effect that consists in the fact that an individual values more than an individual values a loss more than an equivalent gain. And so the consequence is that we have the willingness to accept that is greater than the willingness to pay, as Stefano told us before. And this is considered as a psychological law. The second one is the time inconsistencies and hyperbolic discounting that is against the standard assumption. And it is based on the evidences in behavioral studies that show how the individuals discount the near future at a higher rate than the distant future. And this is considered as a positive anticipation. For example, the discount of old people, retirement, and their use, their future use of, for example, natural park. The third one is the biased cultural transmission that is considered better than the standard theory, and it consists in the imitation of respected individuals in a community. An individual doesn't behave on the base of a cost-benefit calculation. We have an recent example, the influencers. So as it's necessary to underline that this kind of endogenous preferences haven't had influence on the theory and methods of environmental economics. So at the end, we can consider another struggle between CBA supporters and moral cost-benefit analysis advocate. with the CBA supporter that ask what is the difference with traditional CBA rule that takes into account preferences, however they are formed. And the moral cost benefit analysis advocate may answer that the difference is that CBA is a wants-based approach, and wants are different by preferences based on moral notions. So this difference is related to the self-interest based on the wants-based approach. And it has been highly criticized, probably because these critics have confused self-interest on one side with greed and lack insensibility to the wants and needs of others. And such outcome isn't present in the individual preference notion, but is only a perception of CBA's critics. And thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good presentation. You touched upon very, I would say, also complicated issues, and you did it in a very clear manner. So very, very good. I just wanted to ask questions to you. It's a kind of a tricky questions. There's no correct answer, but it's just to have your opinion. In your presentation, you have showed and described the different approaches and different critiques. And my question is, having said all this, what is your personal feeling on cost-benefit analysis? I mean, is it in the end a useful tool? Would you recommend it, or given the limits that you have described, you would say that it's not such a worth?
Okay, maybe I can answer to this question because we have discussed on the group about these critiques and the traditional CBA approach, and we were almost everyone agree with the fact that we were not agreeing with the traditional CBA's approach because of consideration of only the interest of only human, or for example the fact that the CBA is considered only the gain of someone, and in the case of the compensation to the one who loses something, it's okay to adopt that decision or policy or whatever. So we think that maybe, of course, it's a useful tool, but maybe it needs some wider changes and considerations, taking into account also moral options, moral values.
Okay, okay. So
Yeah,
yes.
I just wanted to add that basically, I think all of these critiques I think CBS should be taken as with all of its limits very, very clear. So it should not be taken as some countries I know of the UK, I think take it too far to make decisions
Okay.
about huge social important decisions as if they are they can count the benefits and costs in a mathematical way. So it should be taken with not just a pinch of salt, but like a lot of salt.
Okay, I perfectly agree with you. I think you really made the correct point. We have a tool, it's a useful tool, and it's an important tool because you don't want to take decisions based on personal feelings, on untouchable and unreplicable perceptions. So you want something that is replicable, that is somehow, let's say, even if it's not the correct word, but let's say scientific. But you have to be conscious when using it of its limits. So that's why I wanted you to work on this presentation, because I think it's important that you are conscious that we are describing a very useful tool, but a tool with important and significant limits. Nonetheless, we need it, because we don't want, as I said, to take decisions based on personal feelings, which cannot be scientifically described to others, and proposed also for falsifications. So let's say that a good approach to policy making would be to have tools such as cost-benefit analysis, but then use always some reasoning and good sense, I would say, to evaluate numbers that may come up from these tools. So I would say, let's keep it, but use it with a good amount of reasoning and intelligent approach. Do you agree with this? Is it more or less this that you wanted to say?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay, so thanks again for your presentation. Very, very interesting. Hopefully, I will share your slides as I did for the presentations by the other groups, so your colleagues may find it, if you agree, on the course website.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And one last point before I say goodbye to everybody. I forgot to tell you, let me share my screen. No, is it here? Let me share my screen. I forgot to give you the references for today's lecture. We have been doing chapter 3, paragraph 3D and 3E. And you will find the slides on the website with the details of what you have to skip from paragraph 3D and from paragraph 3E. And besides this, we started working on the Pierce, Atkinson, Murato cost-benefit analysis, and we actually have done chapter 2 of that book. So this is these are the references for today's lecture, and you will find everything on the course website. So, is there any other question? Any other, or some colleagues want to make any comments on the presentation that we have been listening to? Okay. If
I have a question, Professor,
yes.
just about the appello, because we saw in the website that there is a appello.
An extra exam session.
Yeah, it's possible to make it, or we have to wait? How it's working?
No, well, actually, the extra exam is for those who attended the course last year. So I don't know if any of you is in this situation, any of those of you who is online at this moment. Okay, so just to make it clear, there is an extra section, extraordinary section, from 15 of April to 15 of May. And this is only for those who enrolled in the first year last year. So those who are, let's say, I don't want to be unpolite, but who are late, okay? So they have a next opportunity.
Thank you.
For all the others, there's the session in the exam session in June, but I think that I'm giving this opportunity to you. Just you won't have an extra session, but you are able to do part of the exam during the course with these presentations. And by tomorrow, I will also send the grades that I gave on these presentations and problem sets, so you know in advance what is let's say the amount of votes that you already have reached, and that will be part of the final grade for my part of the exam. Okay, is this clear enough? Other questions? Will it be possible that we also have these extra elements in there? I'm sorry, no, it's really, I'm answering your colleague, asking for the extra session to everyone. It's a it's a rule by the university, and only student. It is only for students who had enrolled last year, because you have six exam sessions during the year, and this is an extra one only for those in this particular situation. But as I said, we are trying, me and Massimiliano Mazzanti, to give you an opportunity to recover from the problem of not having the partial exam by having these group works. And so this is what we can do. We cannot.
Would it be possible maybe to, with the first normal appello,
Yes.
since I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think we might not be able to do a normal exam. Would it be possible maybe to arrange the oral examination a bit earlier, to make the first appello a bit earlier?
Okay, this is something I can discuss with Massimiliano Mazzanti and then give you an answer. Obviously, I'm not taking decision on this alone. I have to discuss with him. It could be, it could be a possibility, this one. I'm not sure it will be an oral exam. The exam, cost-benefit analysis exam, used to be a written exam, and if we can, we will keep it a written exam. The university technicians are working in order to provide a platform, an informatic platform, to make possible to have written exams. I don't know if they will do it in time for June, for end of May, June. If they will, we will be having this exam in writing, not oral. If this is not the case, then obviously it will be an oral exam. And but I don't have any conclusive information on this yet. So I will let you know. So to sum up, I will let you know about your request of having an earlier exam for those who attended the course, and I will also let you know, but this is later on, when I will have information from the university, whether it will be written or oral. Is this fine for you? Let me see. Okay. Any other question? Okay, if there are no other questions, then I say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for being here with us today, and see you tomorrow. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye to everybody.